remember the day the judgment of the Section 377 case was pronounced in the Supreme Court. I remember entering with a mix of hope and fear. I was hopeful because the judgment had gone really well, the hearing had gone excellently, the judges had seemed very sympathetic. Even the government had filed an affidavit saying that they would leave everything to the wisdom of the court. But I was slightly fearful because we'd been here before. Just 5 years earlier, the same Supreme Court had reversed the Delhi High Court judgment and recriminalized millions of Indians, turning them into unconvicted felons, whose only crime was to love who they felt a natural inclination to love. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but the process of delivering a judgment in the court is really boring, staid, and dull. Not at all like the movies, and certainly, hopefully, not like the speech. But then the Chief Justice, Justice Mishra, started speaking. He quoted the German philosopher and poet Goethe, and he said, "I am who I am, so take me as I am." And that started a whole series of lyrical, poetic judgments. Justice Chandrachud quoted another great poet, Leonard Cohen. He may not be Bob Dylan, but I still consider him to be a great poet. And he said, "Democracy, it's coming through the air. From the wars against disorder, from the sirens night and day, from the fires of the homeless, from the ashes of the gay, democracy is coming." And you know, that judgment was precisely that. It was the promise and redemption of democracy to the LGBT community. It was a time when the Constitution stood up for our rights. But the icing on the cake, really, were the final concluding words of Justice Indu Malhotra. She said, "History owes an apology to the LGBTQ community and their family members for the centuries of delay in covering the oppression." That those words still give me goosebumps. And with that terrific judgment, millions of us were turned into full Indian citizens again. But you know what? That judgment has come. It's terrific. It's laid down a charter of rights for us. But I'm still left with a lingering feeling that the mindset that gave rise to the first judgment, the judgment that was eventually overruled, still carries on. And I believe that judgment showed a lack of awareness and a lack of empathy. Because I think these two values, when they fuse together, the value of empathy, feeling how someone else feels, and awareness, simply the knowledge of how someone else exists. Once you have that within you, you can start tolerating, accepting, and changing things. Now, what is it that I mean by awareness? When the judgment was, before judgment was pronounced and the hearing was going on in the Supreme Court, in the first judgment, the judges asked the counsel for the Union of India, "Do you know any gay person?" The lawyer jumped up and said, "No, my lord, I know no gay person." He's very proud of it. The judges also nodded their heads very sagely and said, "We don't know any gay people either." At that point of time, the courtroom was possibly full of members of the LGBT community. We probably hadn't come out in large enough numbers for the judges to either know or to care. And that has to change. We have to come out and be counted. You know, it's easy to dislike a gay person, but it's kind of hard to dislike your gay friend. And if you like your gay friend, it's almost certain that you won't dislike another person just for their sexuality. So we have to come out and we have to fight, but more on that later. I said also that there was a distinct impression of a lack of empathy on the part of the judges. Now, what do I mean by that? In their judgment, the judges say that Section 377 was hardly ever used. Gays were in any case a minuscule minority, it didn't really matter. But But in holding that, they ignored the beautifully sad, poignant stories that had been placed before them. There was the case of a transgendered woman in Bangalore. She was standing at a bus stop, minding her own business. Probably her only fault, she wore women's clothing. A group of hooligans attacked her, gang raped her, anally and orally forced her to have sex, and then left her at the bus stop. I suppose, mustering what little dignity she had left, she went to the police station hoping for redress. But as I suppose all of us can already expect, that was the last thing she found. She was stripped naked, she was handcuffed to the window, and she was abused yet again. I think these and other poignant stories like this were ignored by the judges because they lacked a sensitivity and an understanding. You know, sometimes the suffering of others is so alien from our own existence that we can't truly appreciate it. We can't truly understand what it is that someone else is going through. But really, to be better human beings, we have to make that effort. We have to make that change. Now, change is difficult. But if you come out, it becomes easier. It might even eventually end up becoming boring. Now, the Section 377 judgment has come. And it's an amazing thing. But it's only decriminalized, I believe, the sexual act of love. Gay people face tremendous discrimination on a daily basis. If you are at work, you're afraid to come out because you're afraid your boss will either fire you or not give you a promotion. If you're at home, try to get a rental accommodation once you're openly gay. You'll know what true discrimination means. Rights that straight people take for granted are just not available to the LGBT community. If you live with your gay partner and you want to open a bank account for joint household expenses, that's not possible. If you want to take out an insurance policy as a couple, that's also not possible. And then there's medical care. If I fall ill and I'm rushed to the hospital, my partner will not be able to give consent for my treatment because we're not married. The law doesn't recognize us. I remember this beautiful movie called If These Walls Could Talk. It stars Vanessa Redgrave. It's a story of this woman, lesbian woman, who goes with a partner to see a movie at night. They have a lovely evening, they come back. And in the middle of the night, the woman's partner has a stroke. She rushes her to a hospital, but isn't allowed to meet her because they're not married. The woman waits all night long patiently, hoping to hear something about her loved one. But in the morning is told by the nurse that her partner passed away at night, unloved and uncared for. Then there is the holy grail of gay marriage. Now, gay marriage isn't just about going to the courthouse and having a party, having that big Punjabi Sangeet. And it might seem odd that why people care so much about gay marriage when there is endemic discrimination against the gay people. But I think that is to look at the issue from a very narrow lens. Marriage is a state-sanctioned institution. It gives stability to couples, but more than that, it gives a series of rights that straight people can use. Now, if it's important for straight people to get married and for the state to say, yes, I recognize and hereby sanctify your relationship, why should I, as a gay person, not have the same right? This is about equality. If it's good enough for someone else, it's good enough for me. But then I think probably the worst form of discrimination is really against the youth of our country. You know, adolescence is a tough time as it is. We've all been to school and we know how tough it can be. But if you're an effeminate man, or if you're a butch woman, you watch out for that bullying. So really, we have to change things, not just for ourselves, but for the future of our country, for the children of this country, and eventually for ourselves, really. Do we want to grow up in a country where the children are abused and bullied on this basis? Surely not. So change has to come. Well, I don't see that change coming from Parliament, because we are simply an electorally insignificant minority. I believe the change which will come from two sources: the courts and civil society. Now, as regards courts, our judges in our constitutional democracy are removed from the daily to and fro of electoral politics. They're supposed to be immune from the wishes of the majority and are supposed to protect the minority alone. And in a series of judgments, the court has held that the only morality of any relevance is a morality that emphasizes the values of our preamble: justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. And above all, the values of dignity and autonomy. We will have to go to court asking for the enforcement of this constitutional morality. Public morality has no space for us. We have to ask for the enforcement of this constitutional morality. And I believe that over the period of time, we will develop a body of case law and jurisprudence that we can use to fight individual instances of discrimination. But judges are human beings. They've not dropped on from planet X onto us. They're a product of their own society. And judgments in our country are notoriously slow and unpredictable. We only have to see the Section 377 case verdict to know that. So I don't think we can fully rely on the courts alone. I believe the real change will come from civil society. I look forward to the day when the LGBTQ movement becomes a people's movement. This sounds like a pipe dream, that it can't really happen. But I don't think that's really true. The LGBT community is only asking for the right to live life with dignity and autonomy. I don't believe the vast majority of our country will deny them that right. And in any case, I think India is slightly different from other countries in this respect, because we have a cultural history, possibly religious history, of greater tolerance towards the LGBTQ community. In the Hindu scriptures, we have the beautiful story of Lord Vishnu, who transforms into this enchantress, the most beautiful seductress, who then goes and seduces Lord Shiva. And out of the consummation of that act of love, Lord Ayyappa is born. Lord Ayyappa, incidentally, is the same deity whose temple there is in Sabrimala in Kerala, where women of a menstruating age weren't allowed to go till last year when the Supreme Court struck it down. There are the temples of Konarak and Khajuraho with beautiful homoerotic imagery. Even the Islamic Sufi tradition at least grudgingly tolerates homosexuality. There is a tomb of Jamali Kamali not far from here, which is an instance of that tolerance. So how do we then build on this tolerance? And I don't need to say for a moment that, look, we are much better than our colonial masters. After all, Section 377 came in colonial times, but we happily retained it for 70 years. But how do we then use this as an agency for change? I think the prime mover for this has to be first from within the LGBT community. We have to come out. We have to come out in large numbers. We have to be socially aware. Now, I can understand that using a gay dating app or going to parties and dancing in nightclubs is fun. There is place for all of that. But that's not to take away from the fact that we need to be politically aware. And when I say politically aware, I don't mean be a card-carrying member of some political party. No. It's more than that. Every time there is a Pride March, you have to go out and take part in it. It may be the searing heat of June. It may be the polluted evenings of December. You have to march. It's not enough to click like on social media. You have to be seen there. You have to file petitions. You have to go to court if injustice is done to you. But most importantly, you have to live. You have to live openly and freely and let the others see how you're living. Because as I said earlier, there's a lack of awareness. And if you're in the closet, how will people know that you even exist? Change has to be made by us. Change will not be made by somebody else. We have to initiate it, we have to find it. But I know it's easy for me to say, come out. Because after all, no man is an island. You need the support of your community, of your friends, to be able to come out. So what I'd say to gay people is, reach out to a friend or to a family member. And then I will say to that friend and family member that you reach out to other people like yourself if you love your gay brother, sister, or friend. I call this building circles of empathy. You know, as I said earlier, that the LGBT community is electorally insignificant. It's estimated that about 2% of the population is gay. If we each find a friend who's willing to fight for this most basic act of our love, that number could go up to 25, 30 million. It's tough to ignore 25, 30 million, even for the politicians, really. We also need to then reach out for other alliances. Yes, we reach out to friends and family, but we need to reach out to other disadvantaged groups, because injustice somewhere is injustice everywhere. We need to reach out to the feminist movement and to other subaltern movements as well. You know, I'm extremely fortunate to have friends and family that support me. Not everyone else is so lucky. If you have a gay friend or a gay family member, I'd suggest you stand up and be counted. Even if you don't have a gay friend or a family member, if you believe in love, if you think it's good enough for you, please understand and accept that it's good enough for us as well. By fighting for our rights, you are fighting for your own rights, to make this country a place where you and your children want to grow up and live, because love will be tolerated everywhere, it will be cherished everywhere. But I also say we need to reach out to the average Joe and to the celebrities in our country. And here I call out the silent celebrities of the LGBTQ community. You know who you are. You have fame, you have money, but that's not all that life is about. I understand coming out is an intensely personal moment. But in a community where there are such few role models, and in a country where we have a tendency of making heroes and putting them on pedestals, you owe it to society to come out. We must all stand up and be counted. The LGBT movement isn't just about us. It's about all of us. Because remember, at the end of the day, what we'll remember are not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.